was bigger, the bastard, somebody said. As if he had heard, Warwick got to his feet in his office, stretched, and then came to the door. Time we got back with it. The men got to their feet slowly, eating up all the time they possibly could, stowing their dinner buckets, getting cold drinks, buying candy bars. Then they started down, heels clanking dispiritedly on the steel grillwork of the stair risers. Warwick passed Hall, clapping him on the shoulder. "How's it going, college boy?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Come on," Hall said patiently to Wisconski, who was tying his shoelace. They went downstairs. 7 a.m. Tuesday. Hall and Wisconski walked out together. It seemed to Hall that he had somehow inherited the fat pole. Wisconski was almost comically dirty, his fat moon face smeared like that of a small boy who has just been thrashed by the town bully. There was none of the usual rough banter from the other men, the pulling of shirt tails, the cracks about who was keeping Tony's wife warm between the hours of 1 and 4. Nothing but silence and an occasional hawking sound as someone spat on the dirty floor. "You want a lift?" Wisconski asked him hesitantly. "Thanks." They didn't talk as they rode up Mill Street and crossed the bridge. They exchanged only a brief word when Wisconski dropped him off in front of his apartment. Hall went directly to the shower, still thinking about Warwick, trying to place whatever it was about Mr. Foreman that drew him, made him feel that somehow they had become tied together. He slept as soon as his head hit the pillow, but his sleep was broken and restless. He dreamed of rats. 1 a.m. Wednesday. It was better running the hoses. They couldn't go in until the crap crews had finished a section, and quite often they were done hosing before the next section was clear, which meant time for a cigarette. Hall worked the nozzle of one of the long hoses, and Wisconski pattered back and forth, unsnagging lengths of the hose, turning the water on and off, moving obstructions. Warwick was short-tempered because the work was proceeding slowly. They would never be done by Thursday, the way things were going. Now they were working on a helter-skelter jumble of 19th century office equipment that had been piled in one corner. Smashed roll-top desks, mouldy ledgers, reams of invoices, chairs with broken seats, and it was rat heaven. Scores of them squeaked and ran through the dark and crazy passages that honeycombed the heap, and after 2 men were bitten, the others refused to work until Warwick sent someone upstairs to get heavy rubberized gloves, the kind usually reserved for the dye house crew, which had to work with acids. Hall and Wisconski were waiting to go in with their hoses when a sandy-haired bullneck named Carmichael began howling curses and backing away, slapping at his chest with his gloved hands. A huge rat with grey-streaked fur and ugly glaring eyes had bitten into his shirt and hung there, squeaking and kicking at Carmichael's belly with its back paws. Carmichael finally knocked it away with his fist, but there was a huge hole in his shirt, and a thin line of blood trickled from above one nipple. The anger faded from his face. He turned away and retched. Hall turned the hose on the rat, which was old and moving slowly, a snatch of Carmichael's shirt still caught in its jaws. The roaring pressure drove it backward against the wall, where it smashed limply. Warwick came over, an odd, strained smile on his lips. He clapped Hall on the shoulder. "Damn sight better than throwing cans at the little bastards, huh, college boy?" "Some little bastard," Wisconski said. "It's a foot long. Turn that hose over there." Warwick pointed at the jumble of furniture. "You guys, get out of the way." "With pleasure," someone muttered. Carmichael charged up to Warwick, his face sick and twisted. "I'm going to have compensation for this. I'm going to—" "Sure," Warwick said, smiling. "You got bit on the titty. Get out of the way before you get pasted down by this water." Hall pointed the nozzle and let it go. It hit with a white explosion of spray, knocking over a desk and smashing 2 chairs to splinters. Rats ran everywhere, bigger than any Hall had ever seen. He could hear men crying out in disgust and horror as they fled, things with huge eyes and sleek, plump bodies. He caught a glimpse of one that looked as big as a healthy 6-week puppy. He kept on until he could see no more, then shut the nozzle down. "Okay," Warwick called. "Let's pick it up." "I didn't hire out as no exterminator," Cy Ipperston called mutinously. Hall had tipped a few with him the week before. He was a young guy, wearing a smut-stained baseball cap and a t-shirt. "That you, Ipperston?" Warwick asked genially. Ipperston looked uncertain, but stepped forward. "Yeah, I don't want no more of these rats." I hired to clean up, not to maybe get rabies or typhoid or something. Maybe you best count me out." There was a murmur of agreement from the others. Wisconski stole a look at Hall, but Hall was examining the nozzle of the hose he was holding. It had a bore like a .45 and could probably knock a man 20 feet. "You saying you want to punch your clock, Si?" "Thinking about it," Ippiston said. Warwick nodded. "Okay, you and anybody else that wants. But this ain't no unionised shop and never has been. Punch out now and you'll never punch back in. I'll see to it." "Aren't you some hot ticket?" Hall muttered. Warwick swung around. "Did you say something, college boy?" Hall regarded him blandly. "Just clearing my throat, Mr. Foreman." Warwick smiled. "Something taste bad to you?" Hall said nothing. "All right, let's pick it up," Warwick bawled. They went back to work. 2 a.m. Thursday. Hall and Wisconski were working with the trucks again, picking up junk. The pile by the west air shaft had grown to amazing proportions, but they were still not half done. "Happy 4th, Wisconski said when they stopped for a smoke. They were working near the north wall, far from the stairs. The light was extremely dim, and some trick of acoustics made the other men seem miles away. "Thanks." Hall dragged on his smoke. "Haven't seen many rats tonight." "Nobody has," Wisconski said. "Maybe they got wise." They were standing at the end of a crazy, zigzagging alley formed by piles of old ledgers and invoices, mouldy bags of cloth, and 2 huge flat looms of ancient vintage. "Gah!" Wisconski said, spitting. "That Warwick?" "Where do you suppose all the rats got to?" Hall asked, almost to himself. "Not into the walls." He looked at the wet and crumbling masonry that surrounded the huge foundation stones. They'd drown. The rivers saturated everything. Something black and flapping suddenly dive-bombed them. Wisconski screamed and put his hands over his head. "A bat!" Hall said, watching after it as Wisconski straightened up. "A bat! A bat!" Wisconski raved. "What's a bat doing in the cellar? They're supposed to be in trees and under eaves and—" "It was a big one," Hall said softly. "And what's a bat but a rat with wings?" "Jesus," Wisconski moaned. "How did it get in? Maybe the same way the rats got out." "What's going on back there?" Warwick shouted from somewhere behind them. "Where are you?" "Don't sweat it," Hall said softly. His eyes gleamed in the dark. "Was that you, college boy?" Warwick called. He sounded closer. "It's okay," Hall yelled. "I barked my shin." Warwick's short, barking laugh. "You want a Purple Heart?" Wisconski looked at Hall. "Why'd you say that?" "Look." Hall knelt and lit a match. There was a square in the middle of the wet and crumbling cement. "Tap it," Wisconski did. "It's wood." Hall nodded. "It's the top of a support. I've seen some other ones around here. There's another level under this part of the basement." "God," Wisconski said with utter revulsion. 3:30 a.m. Thursday. They were in the northeast corner, Ippiston and Brochu behind them, with one of the high-pressure hoses, when Hall stopped and pointed at the floor. "There, I thought we'd come across it." There was a wooden trapdoor with a crusted iron ring bolt set near the centre. He walked back to Ippiston and said, "Shut it off for a minute." When the hose was choked to a trickle, he raised his voice to a shout. "Hey, hey, Warwick! Better come here a minute!" Warwick came splashing over, looking at Hall with that same hard smile in his eyes. "Your shoelace come untied, college boy." "Look," Hall said. He kicked the trapdoor with his foot. "Sub-cellar." "So what?" Warwick asked. "This isn't break time, Col. That's where your rats are," Hall said. "They're breeding down there. Wisconski and I even saw a bat earlier." Some of the other men had gathered around and were looking at the trapdoor. "I don't care," Warwick said. "The job was the basement, not—" "You'll need about 20 exterminators, trained ones," Hall was saying. "Going to cost the management a pretty penny. Too bad." Someone laughed. "Fat chance." Warwick looked at Hall as if he were a bug under glass. "You're really a case, you are," he said, sounding fascinated. "Do you think I give a good goddamn how many rats there are under there?" "I was at the library this afternoon and yesterday," Hall said. "Good thing you kept reminding me I was a college boy. I read the town zoning ordinances, Warwick. They were set up in 1911, before this mill got big enough to co-opt the zoning board. Know what I found?" Warwick's eyes were cold. "Take a walk, college boy. You're fired." "I found out," Hall ploughed on as if he hadn't heard. "I found out that there is a zoning law in Gates Falls about vermin. You spell that Vermin, in case you wondered. It means disease-carrying animals such as bats, skunks, unlicensed dogs, and rats, especially rats. Rats are mentioned 14 times in 2 paragraphs, Mr. Foreman. So you just keep in mind that the minute I punch out, I'm going straight to the town commissioner and tell him what the situation down here is. He paused, relishing Warwick's hate-congested face. I think that between me, him, and the town committee, we can get an injunction slapped on this place. You're going to be shut down a lot longer than just Saturday, Mr. Foreman, and I got a good idea what your boss is going to say when he turns up. Hope your unemployment insurance is paid up, Warwick. Warwick's hands formed into claws. You damned snot-nose, I ought to... He looked down at the trapdoor and suddenly his smile reappeared. Consider yourself rehired, college boy. I thought you might see the light. Warwick nodded, the same strange grin on his face. You're just so smart. I think maybe you ought to go down there, Hall, so we got somebody with a college education to give us an informed opinion. You and Wisconsin. Not me, Wisconsin exclaimed. Not me, Warwick looked at him. You what? Wisconsin shut up. Good, Hall said cheerfully. We'll need 3 flashlights. I think I saw a whole rack of those 6 battery jobs in the main office, didn't I? You want to take somebody else? Warwick asked expansively. Sure, pick your man. You, Hall said gently. The strange expression had come into his face again. After all, the management should be represented, don't you think? Just so Wisconsin and I don't see too many rats down there. Someone, it sounded like Ippiston, laughed loudly. Warwick looked at the men carefully. They studied the tips of their shoes. Finally, he pointed at Brochu. Brochu, go up to the office and get 3 flashlights. Tell the watchman I said to let you in. Why'd you get me into this? Wisconsin moaned to Hall. You know I hate those... It wasn't me, Hall said and looked at Warwick. Warwick looked back at him, and neither would drop his eyes. 4 a.m, Thursday. Brochu returned with the flashlights. He gave 1 to Hall, 1 to Wisconsin, 1 to Warwick. Ippiston, give the hose to Wisconsin. Ippiston did so. The nozzle trembled delicately between the Pole's hands. All right, Warwick said to Wisconsin. You're in the middle. If there are rats, you let them have it. Sure, Hall thought. And if there are rats, Warwick won't see them. And neither will Wisconsin, after he finds an extra 10 in his pay envelope. Warwick pointed at 2 of the men. Lift it. One of them bent over the ring bolt and pulled. For a moment, Hall didn't think it was going to give, and then it yanked free with an odd, crunching snap. The other man put his fingers on the underside to help pull, then withdrew with a cry. His hands were crawling with huge and sightless beetles. With a convulsive grunt, the man on the ring bolt pulled the trap back and let it drop. The underside was black with an odd fungus that Hall had never seen before. The beetles dropped off into the darkness below or ran across the floor to be crushed. Look, Hall said. There was a rusty lock bolted on the underside, now broken. But it shouldn't be underneath, Warwick said. It should be on top. Why? Lots of reasons, Hall said. Maybe so nothing on this side could open it, at least when the lock was new. Maybe so nothing on that side could get up. But who locked it? Wisconsin asked. Ah, Hall said mockingly, looking at Warwick. A mystery. Listen, Brochu whispered. Oh God, Wisconsin sobbed. I ain't going down there. It was a soft sound, almost expectant, the whisk and patter of thousands of paws, the squeaking of rats. Could be frogs, Warwick said. Hall laughed aloud. Warwick shone his light down. A sagging flight of wooden stairs led down to the black stones of the floor beneath. There was not a rat in sight. Those stairs won't hold us, Warwick said with finality. Brochu took 2 steps forward and jumped up and down on the first step. It creaked, but showed no sign of giving way. I didn't ask you to do that, Warwick said. You weren't there when that rat bit Ray, Brochu said softly. Let's go, Hall said. Warwick took a last sardonic look around at the circle of men, then walked to the edge with Hall. Wisconsin stepped reluctantly between them. They went down 1 at a time. Hall, then Wisconsin, then Warwick. Their flashlight beams played over the floor, which was twisted and heaved into 100 crazy hills and valleys. The hose thumped along behind Wisconsin like a clumsy serpent. When they got to the bottom, Warwick flashed his light around. It picked out a few rotting boxes, some barrels, little else. The seep from the river stood in puddles that came to ankle depth on their boots. I don't hear them anymore, Wisconsin whispered. They walked slowly away from the trapdoor. their feet shuffling through the slime. Hall paused and shone his light on a huge wooden box with white letters on it. Elias Varney, he read. 1841. Was the mill here then? No, Warwick said. It wasn't built until 1897. What difference? Hall didn't answer. They walked forward again. The sub-cellar was longer than it should have been, it seemed. The stench was stronger, a smell of decay and rot and things buried, and still the only sound was the faint cave-like drip of water. What's that? Hall asked, pointing his beam at a jut of concrete that protruded perhaps 2 feet into the cellar. Beyond it the darkness continued, and it seemed to Hall that he could now hear sounds up there, curiously stealthy. Warwick peered at it. No, that can't be right. Outer wall of the mill, isn't it? And up ahead. I'm going back, Warwick said, suddenly turning around. Hall grabbed his neck roughly. You're not going anywhere, Mr. Foreman. Warwick looked up at him, his grin cutting the darkness. You're crazy, college boy. Isn't that right? Crazy as a loon. You shouldn't push people, friend. Keep going, Wisconski moaned. Hall, give me that. Hall grabbed the hose. He let go of Warwick's neck and pointed the hose at his head. Wisconski turned abruptly and crashed back toward the trapdoor. Hall did not even turn. After you, Mr. Foreman. Warwick stepped forward, walking under the place where the mill ended above them. Hall flashed his light about and felt a cold satisfaction, premonition fulfilled. The rats had closed in around them, silent as death, crowded in, rank on rank. Thousands of eyes looked greedily back at him, in ranks to the wall, some fully as high as a man's shin. Warwick saw them a moment later and came to a full stop. They're all around us, college boy. His voice was still calm, still in control, but it held a jagged edge. Yes, Hall said. Keep going. They walked forward, the hose dragging behind. Hall looked back once and saw the rats had closed the aisle behind them and were gnawing at the heavy canvas hosing. One looked up and almost seemed to grin at him before lowering his head again. He could see the bats now, too. They were roosting from the rough-hewn overheads, huge, the size of crows or rooks. Look, Warwick said, centering his beam about 5 feet ahead. A skull, green with mould, laughed up at them. Further on, Hall could see an ulnar, one pelvic wing, part of a rib cage. Keep going, Hall said. He felt something bursting up inside him, something lunatic and dark with colours. You're going to break before I do, Mr. Foreman, so help me God. They walked past the bones. The rats were not crowding them. Their distances appeared constant. Up ahead, Hall saw one cross their path of travel. Shadows hid it, but he caught sight of a pink, twitching tail as thick as a telephone cord. Up ahead, the flooring rose sharply, then dipped. Hall could hear a stealthy rustling sound, a big sound, something that perhaps no living man had ever seen. It occurred to Hall that he had perhaps been looking for something like this through all his days of crazy wandering. The rats were moving in, creeping on their bellies, forcing them forward. Look, Warwick said coldly. Hall saw. Something had happened to the rats back here, some hideous mutation that never could have survived under the eye of the sun. Nature would have forbidden it. But down here, nature had taken on another ghastly face. The rats were gigantic, some as high as 3 feet. But their rear legs were gone and they were blind as moles, like their flying cousins. They dragged themselves forward with hideous eagerness. Warwick turned and faced Hall, the smile hanging on by brute willpower. Hall really had to admire him. We can't go on, Hall. You must see that. The rats have business with you, I think, Hall said. Warwick's control slipped. Please, he said. Please. Hall smiled. Keep going. Warwick was looking over his shoulder, then gnawing into the hose. When they get through it, we'll never get back. I know, keep going. You're insane. A rat ran across Warwick's shoe and he screamed. Hall smiled and gestured with his light. They were all around, the closest of them less than a foot away now. Warwick began to walk again. The rats drew back. They topped the miniature rise and looked down. Warwick reached it first, and Hall saw his face go white as paper. Spit ran down his chin. Oh my God, dear Jesus! And he turned to run. Hall opened the nozzle of the hose, and the high-pressure rush of water struck Warwick squarely on the chest, knocking him back out of sight. There was a long scream that rose over the sound of the water. Thrashing sounds. Hall! Grunts. a huge tenebrous squeaking that seemed to fill the earth. "Haul, for God's sake!"